الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Welcome everybody to the Safina Society Nothin but Facts live stream on a cold. Weather is making us grateful for the sun. It's nippy today actually, and it's gray and cloudy for the second day in a row, which I'm happy in a sense because you have to have a balance so that you can appreciate the sun. I remember Osama Khan, may Allah have mercy upon him, used to say to me, every single day it's clear skies, sunny, and 70 degrees. And I'm bored of it, right? So you got to have the opposites. In the Arabic saying, by opposites things are known. Only by opposites things are known. All right, so let's go to our subject matter today. We have a guest. You're a doctor, right? PhD? No? Professor? Again, we're going to be talking about the gold standard. We're going to talk about everything money related. Now, I guess that ices out the TikTok audience because, you know, they're all young and they don't have any money, right? So, but we will be talking about everything money related today. Not only just the laws around money, the Islamic rulings, the ahkam shar'iyya related to money, but also the state of the economy, the state of the way the world works actually with money, and also our spiritual. And there's a lot of spirituality connected to money. When I say spirituality, I'm talking about attachment. I'm talking about people would al-malu shaqiqur ruh, as Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi always says, Arabic saying. Money is the twin of the soul. People just love money that much. It's how important it is. So there's a lot of belief, aqaid. There's a lot of spirituality. There's a lot of emotion attached to money. So that's what we're going to talk about. Now, anyone who's wants to, the antidote for excessive material attachment, you got to connect yourself. Just read the sayings of Prophet Isa ibn Maryam in the book of Zuhd. From Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. It's one of the main sources. So we're now on saying 72 out of 303. So Tarif Khalidi, he did a good job here collecting 303 sayings from, and then he prioritized the earliest sources. So Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal is, book of Zuhd is cited for around 100, I want to say, around 100 of these sayings. Okay, so or maybe a little less than 100, but we're still on the ones that are found in his book of Zuhd. So let's start off with this, and then anytime that you want to give some commentary on this and how Zuhd, it's a necessary antidote so you don't go astray when it comes to money, because it's so easy to be swept up in money. If you ask why is it Allah's only made a few people rich, most people aren't rich. Today, if you're in California, as you're going to tell us, $180,000 a year salary, you're poor in certain parts of California. Well, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, you're going to realize that's a mercy, because poverty is a much easier trial to handle. Although everyone hates it, it's far easier to find the pious poor than the pious rich. Wealth is an extremely difficult trial to handle. And that's why Allah has mercy upon most people. He doesn't give wealth to a lot of people. Let's take a look at Prophet Isa. He says, O disciples, do not seek the world by destroying yourselves. You can seek the world, but not at the expense of going to hell, number one. And you really shouldn't sell heaven. In other words, your rank with Allah shouldn't be sold off, in the sense that you now accumulate so much, you have no time to remember Allah at all. Rules for the rich. You can have the nicest stuff. You can have the biggest home. You cannot have a lot of stuff. I got 10 homes. I got 25 cars. I got 30 watches. Allah says in the Quran, al-Hakum al-Takathur. Accumulation is what kills you. When you go into a room, it doesn't matter if the stuff is nice or not nice, but it's sparse. there's some sparsity. Okay. It actually makes you feel we're leaving this world. There's not our permanent abode. When you go into a place, whether it's junky stuff or really expensive, nice, good stuff, but it's packed, it gives you a feeling on the inside there's permanence here. Like we're going to be here forever. That's not good. So the Quranic dictum, accumulation has destroyed you. It alters your spiritual state. I'm a big fan of scarcity. Sparseness really is the better word. Sparse. When nobody's home, I guess I'm giving my secret away here, but I go into a different room, just put stuff in bags, put that in the trunk of my car. I wait. If nobody says anything after a week, I either throw it in the garbage or give it in charity. Nobody knows, right? So I have layers to it. Okay. I have an emergency stopgap of 1 week before someone notices. Get rid of it. Make the house more empty. That's why I love Steve Jobs. It's one of the things he lived by. He got it. He understood a lot of things. He had his own issues. I would have never wanted to be personally meet the guy because he has issues. He was a nasty person with terrible akhlaq. But certain things he got. He used to have a home that had his work desk and a lamp and a rug. That's it. Sparseness, emptiness. And we don't need him as an example in Islam. It just happened to be. All right, seek your salvation by abandoning what is in this world. That's the next thing I say Naisa says. Sparseness. Naked you come into the world, and naked you shall depart. Do not seek what sustenance tomorrow may bring. What he means there is don't worry about the sustenance of tomorrow. That's what he means. He doesn't mean don't seek it, don't go to work. It means don't worry. As Sheikh Muhammad Mutawalli Sharawi says, your body should always be tired, but your heart should always be at ease when it comes to this. Your body has to be tired. If your body's not tired every day, you're stealing. It's theft. You're stealing from your employer. But let each day's sustenance suffice, and tomorrow will bring its own concerns. That means the sufficiency in the heart. But your body has to be tired. Pray God to bring you sustenance day by day. This is Imam Ahmad's book of Suhud. All right, so let's turn to our guest. And our guest runs, Alif, let's pull up the website. Right, let's pull up the website. Ethica Institute. Ethica.institute is the name of the website. And it's an organization that gives financial education, how to have a business without falling into riba. Let's turn the camera over now because you've dealt with a lot of wealthy people. And you're telling us off the camera that, or off air, there are a lot of people stuck in riba. And the wealthy are even more involved in riba than the poor, where you think it would be the opposite, where the poor need to take loans, so they go into loans. But the wealthy are more involved in riba. It's very hard for them to resist taking a loan at a certain rate, knowing they're going to have a profit at a higher rate. It's like free money, basically. All right, take it away.
So we're concluding our 40 city speaking tour. Got to meet hundreds of Muslims, American Muslims, and have a sense of the kinds of questions they have and the kinds of issues they've been dealing with. Mm-hmm. So number one, foremost is riba is not really discussed very much. You know, it loses out to movie night. Mm-hmm. And so there's not a lot of talk about it. And then there's not a lot of scholarship related to it. And there's very little transactional volume in North America. So there's little practical experience regarding it. So American Muslims, because it's normalized in the society, you know, like many other things that are haram are normalized, this has now been accepted as a possible strategy for investment, strategy for wealth preservation, strategy for purchasing things. So we've gone from an tangible savings, resourcefulness paradigm to a credit-based paradigm. That's on the spending side. But there are structural issues and systemic issues related to riba. And what I always do is when I go into the talks, I say, look, everybody knows riba is haram. First, we're going to define what is riba, because there's some confusion from the modernists as regards to what is riba. And then we'll discuss the non-Islamic rationale for the problems of riba, the economic, the financial, the environmental, the psychological. We go into that. So I'll just give a succinct distillation of that. Number one, we all know riba is haram because it's in the Quran. There's an explicit threat of a war from Allah and His Messenger in the Quran. So nobody disputes that. And because we live in a banking world, an English-speaking banking world, we need to know what the English word for riba is. And the top translators of the Quran into English, Sheikh Nuhamim Keller's Quran Beheld, Marmaduke Pickthall, A.J. Arbery, they translate riba as usury, U-S-U-R-Y. So that's like, there's no confusion there.
What's the difference between usury and interest?
So then you open up the dictionary. So the best mainstream dictionary, I mean, there's Oxford American, but there's Oxford English, but there's also, that's a specialist sort of huge tome, but there's, Merriam-Webster's is like the standard sort of university dictionary. That's what they gave to us when we went to university, and that's what's commonly used as an authority. Merriam-Webster's, the first definition of usury is interest. So there's no...
So some people say that usury is a lot of interest.
So it actually says usury is interest, and then underneath that it'll say especially exorbitant interest.
Especially, okay.
So especially doesn't mean that it's only exorbitant interest. So this is the received wisdom from not just the Islamic tradition, but the Christian tradition before the recidivism of the 16th century. Interest was banned, even a penny. Judaism for Gentiles, etc. So this is an issue that we have to accept as semantically, and Islamically, and in economically, that interest and usury are the same thing.
Okay, can I ask you a question then?
Yes.
What is Mufti Taqi? You deal a lot with Mufti Taqi Osmani. On your website, it shows that he's signed off on a lot of things that you worked with, you studied under him. What does he say about the Hanafi, what's oftentimes stated, that this is not an abode of Islamic law, America, obviously. Therefore, it's Dar al-Kufr, Dar al-Harb. And therefore, the financial interactions, we're going to interact as they interact. What does Mufti Taqi say about that fatwa? Because he's a Hanafi authority. Does he rule? Obviously, he doesn't rule by that. But tell us, what's his explanation of, or his response to somebody who says, "Oh, Dar al-Harb, let's use interest."
So, not just Mufti Taqi Usmani, but also Dar al-Ulum, and not just Dar al-Ulum, but AOFI, the Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions, AAOIFI, which Mufti Hassan Khalil once told me is the closest thing we have to ijma, scholarly consensus. So like there's the Quran, there's Hadith, and then there's scholarly consensus. So it's according to AOFI, Dar al-Ulum, and Mufti Taqi Usmani, and then the five scholars I studied under him, one-on-one, they all will say the same thing. And in fact, virtually every scholar who has practical knowledge of Islamic finance or of finance, and practical knowledge, as you know, is a condition, not just in AOFI, but in our deen, to have knowledge of what you're giving a fatwa regarding. All of them will say the exact same thing, that in the non-Muslim lands, the rulings of interest apply. So you cannot say that because I'm in a non-Muslim country, they don't apply or the rules are somehow different. So this is central to understanding not the Islamic side of things, but the non-Islamic side of things, because the individuals, I know, talking to people, that one of the individuals who actually gave this permission now regrets it because they've gone down that slippery slope. They've just run with it. And
did he say it publicly? He permitted it publicly?
I don't know if he said it publicly, but and I don't know if it's more than one person, but definitely it is an issue that has far-reaching consequences, because one needs to understand the non-Islamic side of things, which I'll just explain briefly. Is number one, when you have interest, I lend to him at 10%, he will, and all banks do this, they all relend. So they make their money from borrowing cheap and lending expensively. He will lend at 20%, you'll lend at 30%, and it'll go around before that $1 million 10% loan is now 10, 20, $30 million. When you increase the supply of something, anything, what happens to its price? The price of money will go down. That's inflation. So number one is it's highly inflationary. Number two, when you have interest, I mean, most people don't open up a spreadsheet to really understand the compounding effect. But I give an example of $5 billion that Nigeria borrowed, and they now owe $45 billion.
It's insane.
And that was just in a few years. And if you think it was a usurious interest rate, well, it was only 15%, which is less than credit card rates. Yep. So that $5 billion could be $5,000, and it'll become $45,000. So what's $5 billion Nigeria borrowed? They now owe $45 billion, $40 billion of debt, of actually interest, and they haven't even touched the principal, and it's compounding like crazy. They're not going to touch it. It's designed that way. Okay, so that's another aspect.
Let me tell the audience and the people who are listening that one of the rulings in the Sharia that many people don't know about is the prohibition of multiplying debt. So in any one transaction, there would be maximum one debt. And then you cannot therefore move on and create another debt and another debt and another debt. So simple example, I borrow, just like basically what you said, they do, that's what's forbidden, essentially. So any type of deal where you're increasing debts, that concept, that idea is forbidden in the Sharia, because you're just increasing more trouble. Debt is trouble. Debt is harm. And so to increase that is not allowed. To have multiple debts and continuously repeating debts is not allowed. So any situation where like these housing crises that happened essentially was I owe Bahat 10,000. Bahat says, okay, well, let me pass that on to so-and-so, and let me trade you that debt for another debt, and trade for another, and so on and so forth. And now there's 5 people in a domino effect of debt. So that if one person defaults, instead of one person suffering, now 5 people are suffering. That's the idea.
Now, lest anyone think that interest rates are not that bad, in this country, First Premier Bank in 2010 charged 79.9% on their credit cards to some people.
What?
Yeah, yes, that's
in the U.S.?
Yes.
Wait, what year was that? 2010. How is that legal?
There's clearly no usury laws left in the Western Hemisphere as there used to be one.
Was it Trump who stopped it at 24%?
I don't know.
Oh my gosh, that's like a ridiculous number.
So
beyond ridiculous.
So and then there's the inflationary aspect, there's a compounding aspect, and then there's the thing that really should anger a lot of us, which is Riba makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. Mm-hmm. And this is actually why it's there. This is why it's part of our system, because our system is run by plutocrats who want to actively encourage the banking industry and want to actively discourage other things, such as physical ownership of gold and silver, for instance. So number one, there's 4 dynamics, and it's really easy to remember. The 4 dynamics are: the rich will always invest for double, triple-digit returns. They'll do it through real estate, venture capital, hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, whatever, gold, silver. and then they'll get their great returns, and they'll borrow really cheaply, so cheaply that in fact it's a strategy. This is how even private equity firms, which are supposed to be more equity, they will use leverage, i.e. debt, borrowing cheaply, because it's simply, they get a few basis points above prime, etc. Then there's everybody else. And this is where the example came up of my friend who told me that in San Francisco, a family of 4 is below the poverty line if they make $180,000 a year or less, or $90,000 or less if you're an individual. He's making $250,000. He's making $240,000 a year. And he said, I'm not saving anything, maybe $1,000 a month, $20,000 a month he's making. So let's just say poor, middle class, and even somebody like him, upper middle class. These people do not have enough surplus wealth to put into any of the targets these guys are making, the billionaires, the centimillionaires, the decamillionaires. And then the same individual is going to go to the bank and pay 15, 25, 35% to borrow money. The average American cardholder is now $7,000 in debt. And that's average. So you have that family of 4, who knows? So you have this aspect, and then they have no surplus wealth, and then they get these expensive borrowing rates. And you repeat this over 350 million people in the country, and you get a centralization of capital. When I spoke at Harvard University, they asked me, can you give us a practical example? I said, well, I was in Harvard Square. When I came in 87, it was Baybank. Baybank was bought by a bigger fish. I think it was Bank of Boston, bought by a bigger fish, Fleet Boston, bought by the now fish, the biggest fish, Bank of America. So now there's a Bank of America in Harvard Square. This was Riba because Bank of America can simply borrow at a cheaper rate. And it's like going into a casino when the odds are stacked against you. In this case, they're not even odds. They're actually basis points over prime. They're stacked against you. You will lose in the long run. So we get the centralization of capital in which the rich are getting richer, poor are getting poorer. And I would actually make a stronger statement. The poor are making the rich richer. How? Because they're putting their money in the bank as what they think are ostensibly innocent deposits, and they are funding the rich, and they don't get to see the returns. The returns you get at a savings account are abysmal.
Let me tell you a story about a guy who he learned the hard way. This brother, he's a business guy from his youth, really in college. I think he even dropped out of college because he was so good at selling. He sold his first company, selling stuff on Amazon, sold it, put his money in some other investments, and let me take a year off. But in the first round, the first company that he made, he knew that he shouldn't take an interest loan, but the temptation got him. He took a ribawi loan, took his business, did really well, sold it, and he said, I'm going to take a year off. I'll invest my money with friends and get a return, and I'll just relax for a year. And in the span of that year, all his investments crashed and he lost everything. He was young. He wasn't even married.
Probably the best thing that ever happened to him.
100%. He ends up on his mom's couch again, right? Living with his mom again. And he knew, because he had an Islamic education. He went to Muslim schools. Family was very pious. And he knew this is from the riba. Right?
Yeah, the war from Allah and His Messenger. Yeah. What is the war? The war is problems in your life, problems in your children, problems in your marriage, problems in your business, problems in your health. And these aren't the kind of problems that, you're raised by. Everybody has problems. The Prophet ﷺ had problems. The awliya have problems. Those problems, they raise you in rank. They are a means of reward. However, if you give them a positive interpretation, you turn to Allah. But if you're dealing in riba and you're seeing a lot of problems in your life, those problems will continue to lower you until you die and you're lowered into your grave. So first thing to do, first order of business, we talk about zuhud. The first order of zuhud is opening up your financials and looking, am I getting that penny of interest from my bank account and giving it away, sanctimoniously giving it away in charity to some poor person. No, doing the haram is not a means for doing the halal.
Yeah.
So that's number one. And in fact, I wanted to make a little footnote about the al-Harb hadith that people quote sometimes. It's a mursal hadith. And a mursal hadith, as we know, there's Sahih, there's Hasan, there's different categories. And mursal is a broken chain.
Yeah.
So it's not even something that is to be relied upon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which al-Harb hadith?
The hadith about that they ascribe it to Abu Hanifa, and he says that it is okay to deal in riba in Dar al-Harb, in the non-Muslim land. So this is something that nobody has accepted, and because of the perhaps normalized nature of riba in the West and the sort of expedient nature of businessmen who want to like get that loan or whatever, there's been the slippery slope. And alhamdulillah, we have many, many examples of successful businessmen and homeowners and people who've paid for their education without riba. It does not set the Muslims back. In fact, riba is setting not just the Muslims back, but the world.
Yeah.
And this country is $39 trillion in debt. Trillion is like unfathomable.
Yeah. I mean, what this brother ended up doing was that the next business he started was like 10 times more profitable as an industry itself than the first one, maybe 100 times. But this time around, he made it a rule from the start. He's not doing any interest. And anytime he needs to raise capital, he sells off a portion of the business, right? So he's that nobody wants to do that. Everyone wants the interest. There's another company, a restaurant, that they told him, you're a Muslim, sell off parts of it, raise your money that way. And he refused, right? He wants to keep 100% for himself and then just owe the banks money. Well, this brother did the opposite now. He would sell off pieces of his company as long as he's the majority, and then he buys it back later from the people. And they sell off when they see he's doing well. So Allah's blessed his business. It's huge now, probably maybe one of the biggest Muslim owned businesses in the country. And one of the things he's very proud of, zero debt. I don't think there's any company close to where he's at that has zero debt. Right. So everyone else operates as soon as they get an opportunity to take on a loan, and then they know their profits are going to be greater than that. They just keep doing that. So it's all leveraged and it's all based on loans.
And in fact, I'll say one thing that people sometimes think Islamic finance is this newfangled thing. You don't have to call it Islamic finance, because the conventional finance industry has been doing, if it were otherwise permissible in terms of the investments and the transactions, then they would be equally Islamic. So there's 4 kinds of finance. Quick MBA here. 4 kinds of finance. There's debt, equity, trade, and lease.
Explain.
So debt is bonds, loans, IOUs. That's debt, interest-based debt. All we do is take that out, and we have what conventional finance has been doing for centuries, which is equity, trade, and lease. Equity is partnerships, corporations, stocks, shares. As long as it's permissible, you're investing in something that's haram, then that is in and of itself permissible as a structure. Trade is buying and selling. The Prophet ﷺ was a trader. Leasing is renting out, the right to usufruct. So this is standard stuff. And for us to, and you can actually finance things through equity trade and lease-based products quite handily in just about every area. And if you have interest-based, the things that come with it isn't just the problems with the transactions and the economy, but the entire paradigm. I'll give you 2 examples. 90% of all transactions right now are derivatives. Derivatives, the last time I checked, it was 600 quadrillion. I don't even know what quadrillion is. I don't think anybody does, but there's $600 quadrillion of derivatives out there in the market. And, at the top of the infographic, there's a little tiny pyramid, and that's gold, silver, whatnot. Those are actually tangible assets with intrinsic value. And I often give people an example, people who've been enamored by all this digital stuff, whether it's Bitcoin or even the dollar. that you have to make a distinction between, I pull out a $100 bill because that usually gets more notice than the $1. Pull out a bill and I say, look, what is the utility of this? I can buy, 10, 15 burgers with it. I can, take somebody out shopping. That's the utility of the dollar. But the intrinsic value of it is its innate usefulness without any kind of, third-party demand. So the word con game, con artist, game, that comes from confidence. So we put confidence in the dollar, and that's why we think it's worth something. But after 1971, when Nixon took it off the gold standard, we don't have a dollar that is based on anything except our confidence in it. And what we have now is intrinsic value is not in the dollar, but in actual real tangible goods, such as real estate, gold, silver, oil. And that's, this segues into our discussion on BRICS and their unit that's coming along.
Well, I wanted to also ask you about BRICS, and also about, are you able to tell us anything about the Iran deal, its effect on oil prices, gas prices? Any commentary on that?
Well, there is no Iran deal because it keeps getting scuttled by Israel, which is attacking Lebanon. And, we move a little bit forward and then it's ended. So I don't know the politics. I don't know the future of it. I can just say one thing, that the world has come, Trump has turned Iran into a superpower, overnight by making this tiny, whatever it is, 20, 30, 40 kilometers of passable waters, which is a choke point for 20% of the world's oil, a means of levering the entire world, bringing it to its knees. And we have a situation where oil has gone up, gold and silver had already gone up prior to this. And it's a very sort of a perfect storm of events that puts people with institutional paper. I'm getting up there in years, so when I think of something that happened yesterday, like the global financial crisis, I have to remind myself that happened 18 years ago, and half the audience was a kid then. So 18 years ago, global financial crisis, 2008, we had a situation where 50% of the stock market disappeared, 80% of people's pensions disappeared, and we had bailouts. Bailouts was $700 billion of taxpayer money going to the too big to fail banks. And those too big to fail banks the next day handed it to the CEOs in the form of bonuses. Taxpayers very unhappy. Taxpayers happen to be voters. You need to do something else. So what they did was the bail-ins. As effective 2010, Barack Obama signed in the Dodd-Frank Act, which entitles a bank to confiscate your wealth in the event of an imminent default. In normal English, that is, if the bank's going down, you're going to go down with it. So people say, what about the FDIC? The FDIC is the Federal Depository Insurance Corporation, and it insures you up until $250,000. So everyone can sit back and relax if they've got less than $250,000 in the bank. 1 second, there's something called the DIF, the Depository Insurance Fund at the FDIC. When the DIF runs dry, then the FDIC goes to a government, because it's a government agency. They go to the government and say, we need money to pay the depositors. And they'll say, well, we are $39 trillion in debt. So do we want to be in that precarious situation? And this happened in Cyprus and Lebanon, in other places. So it's, it is not the best time in the world to have, bank deposits, institutional paper, etc. So that isn't to say that you can't use the banks if you have an interest-free account, but we'll get into that as to like what to do next in this, environment of like Hormuz and all the other stuff that's happening.
You think America has a little bit of political question, do you think America has any fight in them to decouple themselves from this parasite, which is now literally doesn't care if the host dies or if they're harming the host?
Yeah, it's not actually, people always say it's a complicated situation. It's not actually very complicated. It's very simple. The U.S. has over 700 bases, military bases around the world. They're spread very thin. They have very little um, social capital, to be polite, left, any goodwill left in the Middle East and other places. And this is manifest in things like the BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, member states like Iran and the UAE, they're putting together a gold-backed currency, which, gold and silver prices, which have jumped up a lot, they've always gone up, but really sort of spiked in the last 3 years, is a proxy measure for confidence in currency. So when Nixon took us off the gold standard in 71 and did what he called temporary removal, and we went to a petrodollar, even the petrodollar is now in decline. So you see the US is sort of like, it's strong. I just traveled around the US. It's strong in many ways, but it has to scale back its ambitions. And that's going to first come from DC. The problem isn't the Muslims in Dearborn. The problem is the venal politicians in DC who are beholden to not just foreign interests, but to the banks. So we've got a Federal Reserve Bank here. So one of my audience members in DC was, I said, can I tell them that you work there? And he's like, yeah. So he's a Federal Reserve Bank employee. And I said, I said, let's not trust Wikipedia. Let's go to the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah.
What do they say? The Federal Reserve System, confirmed by this Federal Reserve Bank employee, is neither federal and has no reserves and is barely a bank. So it's not federal, it's a private corporation. Those are the Encyclopedia Britannica's words.
I mean, it's a lie. Why would the name is a lie?
So yeah, it's a private corporation and it has no reserves. It sets the most important thing to a ribawi system, which is interest rates. And then they print the cash. And then they lend it to the US government, and the US government pays back on interest to the tune of now a quarter of the 39 trillion roughly.
How is that not a division? How is a country doing that? Like, how do they not have a division?
I think the
that does that.
The twin prong of the money from the banks and the bankers and the oligarchs and the media. And the average, I sit in the lobby of the hotel in the morning, I'm checking out or checking in. So I have a pretty good idea what Fox News is saying. And it's basically where, the entire American public has been gaslit for decades. And it's very hard to get out of because you've got the propaganda and the media, and you also have a powerful surveillance state. Palantir is spreading. You've got tokenization of financial wealth. That means putting data entries for each transaction, for each thing you own. That's happening. And this is also confirmed by the IMF, International Monetary Fund. So this is a new reality we're living in. How do we get out of it? Well, the very first thing we can do is get out of Riba, because Riba is what supports the system. And I really, if you take that step, because the beauty of Riba is that it eats itself up eventually. It comes to nothing. So eventually things will come to nothing, but it'll be a painful cataclysm that we all have to go through.
Yeah.
Now, do we want to? No, we don't really want to. We can have a steady, sustainable, equity, trade, and lease-based economy. If you I traveled to Malaysia, traveled to other places, they have a lot of self-sufficiency and not much inflation. Things are pretty, affordable in these places. So we can have that, even though they also have lots of debts. So it's not we're living in a world in which there's really a lot of riba already in the system. And that's what we have to do first.
Explain to me, how does it eat itself up?
Well, every time you have, we'll just take the example of actual history that we have. When the global financial crisis happened, banks literally disappeared. I was in Dubai at the time, and we had a situation where the conventional banks were in huge trouble. Some of them disappeared, and the Islamic banks, such as they were, they survived because they had physical asset, they had asset and service ownership. So when you have an asset or service in any transaction, it bottlenecks it. You can see the asset, that's a house, that's a car. But when you have money for money transactions, it's blind. I can lend it to you for 7% plus basis points, but I don't know what you're going to do next with it. You could lend it to the worst kind of criminal. And there's very little, as the banks call KYC, know your customer, there's very little visibility on what's happening with loans. You can borrow and say, I'm going to do it for this, but I'll give you a perfect example is the average Indian farmer is paying 70% per month on Riba. And that starts off from loan sharks. Loan sharks borrow from a local Indian bank. They get it from some sovereign wealth fund, etc. It goes back to the big banks. So this is a situation that we can control. We have freedom to leave it. I personally know people who've left it. And the dust that touches everybody, one manifestation of that is inflation. So we're living in a country, this country is now $39 trillion in debt. And this is a mostly ribawi system. How else does it eat itself is environmentally. Brazil owes $2 trillion of debt. It's tearing down the Amazon rainforest that provides all of us with a quarter of the world's oxygen. That forest will be gone within our lifetimes unless we stop it. How are they doing it? They're paying it off, this $2 trillion of debt, just to service it by giving us lumber. So
let me ask you this question.
So it's not just eating the economies up, it's eating the world up.
And before I continue so Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, there are latest members, Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. These are all the nations that have partnered up. Now, beyond the 11 full members, there are partner countries: Algeria, Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Nigeria, Thailand, Turkey, Vietnam. Now, just because they're going for a gold back doesn't mean they're not in the ribawi system. So that's just one thing. So it's different. They're different issues. But I wanted to ask you, what is a secular basis for any nation to get out of interest? Because we all see that we get out of interest because God told us to, right? That's like cuts it out. It makes it really easy for us. But when somebody doesn't believe in that, they might see the harms of interest, but they still be convinced of some of its benefits. So it's not enough just seeing the harms to get out. So what would be the argument to a secular person? What would be his justification to completely excise interest from their personal economy?
Depends on who the person is. So if the person is wealthy and he's a politician and he is beholden to foreign interests, particularly those from moneyed quarters, then he has virtually no interest in doing it. If he is an ordinary man, or if he's an honest politician, then he has every reason to do it because his country's survival depends on it. Can you think of a single country that is not usurping its human and natural resources to satisfy the insatiable appetite of the IMF, the World Bank, the Paris Club, and other northern agencies? I can't think of one. So it's a survival thing. So the answer is, it depends on who the person is. If he has an interest in getting rich and he has no morals, he has no scruples, then certainly interest is the way to go. You will get richer through doing because what's the problem with equity? It's a little bit painful because you've got to take more risk. Yeah. You're going to actually, invest in a home, take asset ownership. It's not simply enough to say, oh, well, Islamic finance has the same cash flows as conventional finance, therefore it's the same thing. No, somebody said to me, well, if it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, maybe it's a duck. I said, well, one duck is halal and not one duck is, machine slaughtered or whatever, not so halal. So you have to understand that it is in everybody's interest to not have a world of riba. In everybody's interest, and if you've read, the idea of the barbarians at the gate, you will eventually have a mass civil unrest. you know, and that is going to affect even the wealthy. You know, when I traveled through California and Texas, I came across very wealthy families, and literally some of them would be just a few hundred yards away from some of the poorest people. It doesn't take a lot of time and money in a country with 350 million people and 400 million guns for there to be civil unrest, especially with the price of fuel already at $5, $6, $7. Diesel is now $7, $8. You know, and diesel is how you get your food, those 18-wheelers.
So I remember being in Egypt when I was young. And I see this country's so poor. There's like poverty everywhere. People begging at every corner. You can't do anything. You feel guilty going out to eat when right outside the restaurant, and they don't have laws stopping this stuff. They don't have enough police to move them away. They're literally everywhere. Little kids begging, beggars everywhere. And people used to say, you know, I thought CIA and the US pays Egypt to placate it to be a buffer for Israel. I said, yeah, but the elites, they steal it, right? I used to think, what kind of person steals? All right, so you got a lot of money, but your country is literally miserable. It looks miserable. It's dirty. It's full of poverty. And you got to live in the country. So what's the value of being having all this money in your bank when you step outside your palace and it's misery? Like, I would probably rather, you spend most of the time out of your house anyway. So I'm thinking in my mind, if I'm going to steal, I'll steal 50%. I'll improve the country 50%, right? At least I can walk out. At least when foreign diplomats come, I can poke my head up. But the reputation of the nation had gone so low. So how is that enjoyable to you as a dictator? And you're saying basically we're also, the capitalist countries are likely headed to a similar imbalance, which leads us to this idea of vulture capitalism. So that's a term that's being used. So why don't you comment to us a little bit on that?
Well, when I was at Morgan Stanley, investment banking, I can assure you that I didn't feel like I was in the belly of the beast, and everyone was normal, and we were acting normal. There was no like, you know, evil guy rubbing his palms in the corner office or something. It's just like everybody looked and sounded and acted normal. The issue is not like, for instance, you gave the example of the Egyptian wealthy. All the wealthy people don't think they're doing something wrong. The reason is that nobody, and you know, I think I was writing a paper for grad school, and my uncle looked over my shoulder. He said, "That's riba," and I turned to him and I said, "What's riba?" So, you know, people are disabused of their ignorance after they study the problem, and most people will never study the problem. So the average wealthy person thinks riba is okay. They haven't made the, you know, concatenation between like, this is the bank, and this is the environment, and this is my life, and this is my family, and this is my kids. They haven't made that connection. And yet there's excellent expositions of the connection between riba and architecture. Okay, you know, we have the ugly architecture. Nobody's like, let's go visit the shopping plazas of 1980 that people want to visit, like, you know, Route 66, the places, you know, the generative organic architecture that we had. Or maybe they want to visit like the Basilica in Venice, or maybe they want to visit the Eiffel Tower or something. These things were created at a time when money was not the only consideration, efficiency was not the only consideration. And that has affected literally everything. I mean, when I went from like LA to Dallas to Nashville, you know, the same Simon was owning all the malls. I looked up, the Simon family is, you know, this big Jewish family that invested, and they proliferated their malls. So this is the wealthy don't really see it. The poor don't really see it. A lot of Muslims don't see it. And the problem is one of ignorance.
The problem philosophically with capitalism is that it renders the bottom line as essentially the God. That's what determines our behavior in all things. And that's our philosophical issue with capitalism, is that it renders that to be the be all and end all is that. And hence, in a capitalist nation, the amount of times you're just talking about trade and the economy. It's like you open the news, all they talk about is the economy. Everything revolves around that, and that's philosophically the biggest issue. Whereas, like you said, in previous civilizations, you making money or not is not the only consideration.
Well, I would push back slightly, and that is that when this country has been capitalist, it's enjoying its 250th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been capitalist. And yet we have American presidents who have spoken against the interest-based system.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Jackson, JFK, and others. And they have actually paid the price.
Yeah.
You know, I think Lincoln was shot, but Andrew Jackson, there was like multiple attempts at trying to kill him, but one time the gun locked and this and that. So
I don't know. Andrew Jackson was against interest.
Oh, absolutely. He was one of the. So it is. Even Benjamin Franklin. He said, "Neither borrower nor lender be."
Mm.
So it is capitalism and socialism are two sides of a ribawi problem, because riba eventually runs away, and that's what happened to this country. It's the runaway train ends up becoming like a wrecking ball, and in the middle you have Islam, which balances the socialist side, which cares for the poor through zakat, through sadaqah, through not having riba, and yet it acknowledges that we do have this desire for wealth, we have this desire for sustenance, we do fear poverty and these things. It acknowledges these things. So Islam is like that perfect balance, and this is where I think a lot of countries can learn from the Muslim paradigm, and in fact Muslim countries can learn from their own paradigm.
Alif, let's go to the Q&A now. If you're on WhatsApp, if you're on TikTok, Instagram, whatever, put your questions in. Alif, let's go to the TikTok chat for a second. I don't know if I'm gonna regret that, but all right. This is the person who says, it's not related. Can I study books of tasawwuf if I'm not a scholar? You can read you should read about zuhud and the pure diseases of the heart. That's for Rami 122. Zuhud, asceticism, disease of the heart, purification of the heart. Read Imam Nawawi's book of Adhkar and say as many as you can. So in that respect, you should be doing that all the time. Scroll, see if any questions related to the topic. Blah, 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 blah. Nothing related to the topic. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next. Let's go over to YouTube then. Zuri says Islam is a capitalist religion. Capitalism is an economic approach, not a philosophy. But there is a philosophical element to it. There is a moral element. Why else did Adam Smith, he just didn't write a book on economics? There were morals, ideas in his book. But also there is definitely, whether it's said or not, that economics is the number one most important element in life, really, essentially. That is the philosophical. But what's your comment on this, that Islam is a capitalist religion?
Well, Islam acknowledges the concept of capitalism, but there's many versions of capitalism. So we use capital, equity, trade, and leasing definitely use capital. So there's no problem with money. Money can be power, as some of the fuqaha have said. So we don't have an issue with money. We have a problem with zulm. Yeah. So, the oppression of ourselves and our families and our communities and our countries. This is the issue. So capitalism can be without interest, but it is not sufficiently strong. It weakens itself. So sometimes people will say, well, the Muslims have been left behind because we didn't do interest. Now, that's virtually impossible to prove. But I would say, just if we looked at individual countries or even regions, you can't think of a single Muslim country that has not dealt in riba at some level, whether at the central banking level or the corporate or the commercial level, or even at the retail level. Mm-hmm. There, even, Afghanistan is often given an example, but even at the street level, there are loan sharks. So you have this situation where it's permeated all of society, and you can do without it, and you can do much better without it. It's just that it's very, very useful for the rich. The easiest way to make money is to find someone poor or a country that's poor, lend them money, and you have total control. Okay, you want to magnanimously roll it over and give them a softer schedule and a softer loan. You can take their assets.
Yep.
You can take their natural resources. You can take their water. Oil. The list goes on. So
let's go with the problem with Marxism is with private property. Now, they don't mean your stuff like your thobe or something. What they mean is they're against this idea that you have a factory, used your money, now employ people and take all the profits. Islam, we don't have a problem with that. Well, they reply, will say, well, he's abusing the workers, giving them very small wages. So he said, okay, now we can talk. So on one hand, if a person accepts to do a job at a certain price because they're that poor, so they will do it for like 50 cents a day, like these people making soccer balls for Adidas or whatever, that was a scandal back in the day. But and they're like, hey, they accepted to do it. So yeah, that may make something valid legally, but we in Islam also have a concept that there could be something valid, but it's still wrong. Now, how is it wrong? It's wrong in the effect that it has. Yes, your transaction was valid, but you're still sinful for the effect it could have on a person, right? So in the same way, I could do a lot of things. A business owner can, on a whim, fire everybody, close the whole business down, take my money and go on a yacht. Totally valid behavior, legally valid behavior. But I just harmed a lot of people. I just laid off all these people and hurt them. And I can be held accountable for that pain to the degree that I knew it's going to happen. And I was cold-blooded when I did it, cold-hearted when I did it. So in Islam, we have this two levels. It's not just only about what's valid. So there is an element where the capitalist, the factory owner, the business owner, does have to take into consideration the righteousness, the piety, the goodness of his transaction. So give us a little commentary on that aspect.
On
that middle category between legal validity versus, because that's really what the socialists, they're in their mind. When you're a factory owner, you're abusing your workers.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we say in Islam, no, he's allowed to actually make a profit off of his investment, sit back and not do any work, which is not even true. Owners do a lot of headache work, right? They have a lot of liability on them, but that they're harming the workers. They're not taking care of the workers. Like, what does Islam say about that aspect of trying to make money, but at the same time, not abusing your employees?
It goes back to the same balance that we have between socialism and capitalism. Capitalism hasn't worked, isn't working, it's unsustainable. It was made at a time when any abstraction of the environment as we know it, there was no like consciousness of it at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So that, in that sense, it's old-fashioned and it's showing its age. Socialism, Marxism has laid waste to millions of lives in China, in Russia, and elsewhere. So it's an experiment that has repeatedly failed.
Yeah.
But that is not to say that there are aspects of it that can be useful. So most of the depredations of those experiments were due to corruption, centralization of decision making. The Great Leap Forward in China, for instance, they made all the decisions for the local farmers at the central level. Yeah. So that doesn't really work. There is this. It's been written about. Small is beautiful. There's other books, but it is imperative that we have this balance. So We are good to our workers. We pay them, and yet they have ownership of their wages, and we have ownership of our factories. The separation of ownership is very much this equity-based principle that has worked for millennia. So I don't see any reason for us to tamper with that idea. And if you look at all the products right now, like Mudaraba, Musharaka, they're equity-based. Salam, Istisna, Murabaha, these are trade-based. Ijara is lease-based. Sukuk can be a combination. So it is possible to do it, but we need the political will, and people need to make that connection that a life without interest-based finance and interest-based banks is a far better life for everybody, including the rich.
And if Lonnie's changed this title of the stream to how capitalism eats itself, and then let's do a rapid fire. You just mentioned a number of terms that will be good for people to know. Let's start with Mudaraba.
The closest analogy to Mudaraba would be like venture capital, without the debt, obviously. So venture capital is one person brings the capital, another person brings the smarts, the entrepreneurship, and the person with the capital makes an investment, and he gets a return of the profits depending on his equity share. So
and he doesn't necessarily.
And usually with a Mudaraba, it's all purchased by the. But although there's hybrids, but once you have that, you have something very close to sort of venture capital type arrangement or private equity, although not to be confused with the leveraged varieties.
Musharaka.
Partnerships, corporations, stocks, these are things, as long as they're permissible. Musharaka is basically that.
Murabaha.
Buying and selling. In fact, it's buying and selling with the price, the profit rate disclosed. And it's done spot at execution. The execution is at spot. So there's no, people say, well, it looks like the same thing, but it's not, because you will not get a conventional bank to buy you a stake in a home. Mm-hmm. They don't do murabas of homes because they tend to be, murabas tend to be for shorter tenors. But if you do it, then you will not be able to convince any conventional bank to take an equity stake in your home, which is precisely what happens with many of the co-ownership models that we see. And I can actually discuss, by the way, one thing I should say is a lot of the questions that we get are just easier to answer by email. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna, at the risk of flooding my inbox, I'll just give you the email. Mm-hmm. And if you have questions, if they're easy answers, we'll answer them free of charge. If they're not, I do like to pay the scholars for their time. So you can just email your questions to contact@ethica.institute. No.com, so it's contact@ethica.institute.
Sukuk.
Sukuk is basically plural of sak, which means certificate. So it is a purchase. It is basically, there's a tradable security, a tradable asset, and that tradable asset, it can either be a sukuk of something of various kinds. It can be musharaka, it can be ijara, it can be other kinds. So a sukuk is a certificate that says that you own a share in a company. It's like a stock, basically. And as long as what you're trading is permissible, then it's permissible to own that stock.
A guy has a deal with another company. The company now owes him XYZ dollars a month, okay, for the next 5 years. He wants to cash out of that by selling that contract to somebody for, let's say, 83, 82, 85% of the total debt that's divisible over 5 years. So he'll take 85%. The buyer will then gain over the 5 years the difference. Is this a lawful contract?
Debt? He's selling his debt?
It's
or
not
he's
a
selling
debt.
his assets?
No, he's selling the deal.
So I need to know more than that.
So let's say I came and I serviced your home, for example. Okay. And let's say,
what do you mean you serviced my home?
with electricity or something. Okay. I'm like an electric company.
Okay.
You now owe me for what I've done, what I do for you, or what I've done for you over 5 years.
Yeah,
Right.
so you're basically securitizing a stream of payments.
Mhm.
That's money for money. And by the way, look into the camera and I'll tell you, I'm not a mufti, I'm not a scholar, I'm just a reformed investment banker, and I will be able to convey what the scholars are saying. It's basically four schools, Sunni, traditional, AOF compliant, AOF based stuff. You know, saying something Sharia compliant is like saying something's halal. You know, you sort of want a little bit more information than that. So it's AOF compliant, which is really like super Sharia compliant. And but I'm not in a position to give a fatwa, but I could just convey what the scholars would say. And for that particular transaction, you are basically doing a money for money transaction. So yeah, that wouldn't be allowed.
Wouldn't be allowed. Okay, next question is what do you think of commodity murabaha? This is from Ibn Awesome. What do you think of commodity murabaha and tying the profit rate to inflation?
Okay, so it's conflating a bunch of different things because the profit rate doesn't change in a murabaha. But so first of all, commodity murabaha. Nobody really likes murabaha. And nobody, the people who don't like murabaha really don't like commodity murabaha because it is, very easy to do something very quickly with a commodity. The commodity is sitting in Switzerland and you're just doing these transactions back and forth using some metals. It's highly frowned upon. Now, sometimes scholars will say, and I actually don't know the latest ruling on AOF's standards for commodity murabaha, but sometimes the scholars, and I'm not just talking about commodity murabaha right now, but I'm talking about permissible transactions like murabaha that are less than ideal. If you're trying to get somebody out of riba, then even Mufti Taqi Usmani will say that this is a means to an end, but murabaha is not the end. What we should be trying to do is equity-based transactions like musharaka, mudaraba, or even lease-based transactions, which like ijara. But the problem is murabaha can be used for expedient purposes many times. However, a separate thing is benchmarking. They use a interest rate to measure something, and that again, somebody said this is 90% halal. I said there's no such thing as 90% halal. Yeah. It's either halal or it's not.
Like 90% alive.
Yeah.
10% dead.
So you can't be 90% married. So some things have discrete, on off. So you can have a murabaha transaction, but let's just separately, we're going to talk a little bit about benchmarking. If you benchmark to an interest-based index, but your transaction is structurally, substantively, materially permissible and totally fine, that is fine. Okay, so I'll give an example would be, this bottle of water. If I say, as the seller of this bottle of water, if I say, every time alcohol is $1, this will be 5 cents to the dollar.
Okay.
So I'm tracking the price of alcohol, and I'm saying, okay, my water is 5 cents of that. Does the water become alcoholic somehow? No. So benchmarking is like that. Having said that, we should have Islamic indices that we can benchmark against, and I believe some have been launched. I think the Dow Jones Dow Jones Islamic Index has been launched many years ago.
Look that up, Edico, please.
So that is an index that we can be using, and I would like to mention that there's a new full service Islamic bank. The head of our Sharia board, Mufti Ibrahim Isa, is the head of their Sharia board. It's called Stearns Salam Bank. That's STEARNS, Salam Bank. They provide business finance. I believe they provide retail accounts. So, there are options available. Having said that, I do not recommend financing anything. I recommend the old-fashioned way of, slow and steady and all that. But that's,
your recommendation, or your preference. I'll put it that way because that's safer. to say. That's a safer word to say. So no one say, "Oh, he recommended this to me," but your preference is to buy gold, straight up buy gold bricks.
This is the time of the evening when I tell the audience, I'm like, "Do you guys want?" I'm not a financial advisor, but do you want me to share with you what I've done for myself?
Mm-hmm.
And they usually say, well, they always say yes, and I tell them. So I'm disclaiming any like financial advisory license, anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say this: what I've done myself is I have not owned stocks in 30 years. I've not had a 401k. I closed it in my first year or two of work, and I've only owned 3 things in my entire life, which was certainly in the last 30 years, is basically 1 used car, 1 property, and gold and silver, physical gold and silver. Now this is something that everybody did before in previous generations. They always held physical gold and silver. And then, in fact, even the dollar, in 1971, like we mentioned earlier, was basically gold backed. So we had this concept, but it's slowly been eroded. We can come up with reasons why. I personally think it's because gold and silver are very hard to track in a surveillance-based economy, very hard to track. You can't tokenize it. All these things are basically problems with gold and silver. However, the good news is that you have financial sovereignty and ownership. And now you don't have to just keep the gold and silver at home. And people ask me, how do I buy it? I'll just go through the steps.
Mm-hmm.
Should I go through the steps?
You go through the steps, how you buy it, and also how do you protect it?
How do you protect it? Yeah.
Yeah. No one wants that stuff lying around their house.
Yeah. So what the experts recommend is the following. So they will. So I understand. I've never done it, but Costco apparently sells gold ounces. So you can go to any gold market, usually the jewelers and whatnot, find 3 of them, find Costco, whoever, and buy your gold ounce. Okay. Or it could be a gold gram. A gram is.
Where do you buy it?
Personally, I just go to the jewelry market, somebody I trust, I've checked out, and, he's given me a good price. It's usually a little bit more than the, couple percent more than the spot price that everybody in the world has on the
Where
screen.
Do you find the spot price?
Just USD gold price, and you'll get it.
And if put that on the screen for you, AppMex. AppMex.com.
The spot price is going to be the same everywhere for 24 karat gold ounces, and you'll pay a premium over that, whether it's UAE, Swiss, Jordanian, etc., American. So you will get a standard price. Now, it's up to you. If you don't trust the seller, there is actually machines that check for the carat, the fineness of the silver. It checks for it. And also you should only buy it where you live. It's not easy to travel with, go through airports with your sack of gold or silver, whatever. So what I would recommend is, number 1, you find a reliable seller. And if you can't find a reliable seller, then you have it checked out by that machine I just mentioned. Once you do that, you put your cash down, you get it, you keep it somewhere safe. You have 2 options. And by the way, I'm not talking about gold ETFs. Everybody wants to do everything on their phone.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about funds or unallocated storage or anything like that. The 2 safest places to keep it are, number 1, if you have a safe place, then a secure, a home with a security system. Okay. The kind of home that, like, if somebody were to come in with a sledgehammer, you've got 10 minutes before the cops arrive or you arrive or somebody. If you don't have such a situation, many people aren't in such a situation, then you can have it as allocated storage in a third party, not a safety deposit bank, but a deposit box in a bank.
Not that, because of the far-reaching and constantly increasing powers of the Dodd-Frank law.
Oh,
okay. So they'll literally just take it.
I don't know. So
where do you put it?
What I do is I keep it in a security system. However, if you don't have a security system, then you keep it with a third party like Brinks. Okay.
What do you mean security system?
Like, a third party private organization that actually is able to keep it in a vault for you. You'll pay a little bit of money for that service, depending on how much it is, but Brinks does this kind of thing, and other companies do this. Now, there is one problem, because I used to do this.
Yeah.
The problem is when I sold silver, and there was like a huge panic buying of silver. It was going up $1 a day for a while, and it's probably like quintupled in price in the last 3 years. Gold is more than doubled in price in the last couple of years. So it's really, it's outshone, certainly in the last 5 to 10 years, outshone the S&P 500. And I think if I'm not mistaken, most of the last 30 years, it's done better than S&P 500. Now, having said that, it's not an S&P 500 type instrument. Like, it's not an income or capital gains type instrument. It's a wealth preservation instrument. And in this day and age, where the confluence of many negative fundamental market factors affect all of us, it is wealth preservation is the order of the day. So I sold the silver, and the guy's like, okay, we'll sell it, but are you sure this and that? He hemmed and hawed, but 3 days later, I got the money.
Okay.
From the third party. We're now talking about allocated storage.
Yeah.
I got the money, etc. Everything is fine. Then I got a call from my sister, and she's like, well, Atif, now they have a 45-day hold on everyone's metal. So now your metal is being held by a third party for 45 days before you can sell it.
So that's frustrating.
Well, frustrating. And also, the regulators must have called that, we need to slow the market down a little bit. So this is one problem. However, it may be safer than your home.
Yeah.
So I keep it in the security system at home. If somebody comes in, wants to take it, they have to first find it. And then by then the cops have arrived. It only takes 5 minutes for the cops to get there.
Is it like, you get like a old-fashioned safe that's digitized?
Personally, I think safes attract attention. So they lift up the safe, unbolt it, and then we'll take care of it later. Don't try to be too clever and keep it in your freezer or something. Your drawers or your cupboards. You have to figure these things out. But if that's not possible, it's not possible for everybody, then you should have allocated storage. Allocated simply means there is a serial number on an ounce or a bar or whatever, some kind of physical, tangible gold or silver is in your name. Unallocated means, you got 100,000 in that warehouse, but allocated means these are your bars and I want them back, please.
Who holds them?
The third party, like Brinks, for instance.
But then the 45-day can impact.
That's the price you pay. So it's, you have to be between these two choices. Those are a lot safer than having a gold ETF or a gold fund or something, or a mining stock.
So what Brinks, you never even see your golds.
You see it when you first buy it and you give it to them.
But how do you know that actually it's not some company that's going to go under, and you know these people?
I mean, at some point you have to sort of trust but the system. But I mean, Brinks has been around for a while, and there may be others, but it's a lot safer than the bank. Banks have gone down, and but again, I personally prefer the home option, but not everybody has that option. But the most important thing is that it's physical gold in your name, allocated storage, and you can access it whenever you want. Sometimes there's a hold. Maybe they change the rules on that, but this is your safest bet. Much, much safer than Bitcoin database, entries and dollars and 401ks and pensions and stocks even. for me. Okay. There may be people out there who derive comfort from third-party institutional paper, but I'm not convinced. I haven't seen it. It doesn't inspire my confidence.
And if look up for us what the moon sighting websites is a different subject, what they said about the start of Muharram, because we need to tell everybody about the fasting this week of Ashura. I just want to get right that in this case, I believe that there's a difference between most people's iPhone Hijri calendar and the actual Hijri calendar. So the Hilal of Muharram was sighted Tuesday, June 16th is the first day of Muharram. So let's go Tuesday, June 16th. All right, so that's where it's one day off from people's apps. So the fasting would be Wednesday, Thursday, or Thursday, Friday. Okay, so it's a sunnah to fast on these days, Wednesday and Thursday, or Thursday and Friday. Okay. This question came in saying best investments for someone that has liquid, so that we could liquidate later. We just answered that regarding the gold and silver. And
yeah, I mean, I bought a car. I just went to the gold guy, put the coins down, got the cash, went to the dealer. 15 minutes later, it's over. Very practical, very doable. Yeah. And the whole time I held that gold, it was going up in value. Yeah. And people say, well, it's gone down. Okay, well, we're not talking about investing for like 3 months or 3 days. This isn't day trading. This is definitely a long-term investment. In the long term, I bought silver at 19. It went up to 120. It's now at like 70 something or wherever it's at. But I know that in the long term, why? Because it has intrinsic value. Silver is used in electric cars, solar panels, data centers, you name it, smartphones, so on, manufacturing. Gold is used in all kinds of places. These are things that have been around for 6,000 years. Mm-hmm. The Prophet ﷺ, he ended his life with dirhams. Yep. We had the silver dirham, we had the gold dinar, and people are coming back to it. Yep. And I can't think of any reason to have a complete straight. I always ask the audience, I'm like, don't trust me, trust yourself. Yeah. Ask yourself one question. Who do you trust more? Yourself, mm-hmm, or a stranger you've never met who actually has a market record, yep, of theft? So,
and also, I mean, we're a people of qat'i and dhanni. Gold in your hand is qat'i. Nothing can be more qat'i, explicit, clear, tangible. Nothing can be more tangible, explicit, and clear than that. In contrast, these pieces of paper in your hand, or now we've evolved to not even paper in your hand.
Yeah. That's where things are headed.
Mark on a screen.
Yeah. Well, the digital Fed currency is where things are headed.
You lead the Q&A. I have to take a quick breather. I'll be right back.
One thing I would also mention is that the gold and silver is not, we don't mean hoarding. You're not like Midas sitting on a round mound of gold coins and we're just hoarding the money. All we're doing is wealth preservation, substitution. We're just, money that we're otherwise keeping in cash and third-party institutional paper, pieces of paper as investments, stocks or whatever, 401ks, etc. We are simply preserving it in something that's tangible with intrinsic value. You want me to read the questions? Yes. So question, some people prefer investing in stocks rather than gold or silver because they expect to pay less zakat on shares. What are your thoughts on this? Well, they should expect to pay the same amount. The zakat on gold and shares is the same. How do you access your gold and silver if keeping it a third-party vault service? every institution has its own rules, and what you do is you find out what those rules are and you try to access them in the easiest way possible. It's not expensive. So buying and selling with third parties is possible, but it's not as convenient as keeping it yourself. Are there more questions? Oh, okay, yeah. Are any Islamic financial institutions working on a Sharia-compliant equivalent of the JP Morgan Hedged Equity Index? And do you think creating such a product would be a good idea? I don't know the answer to that. The ones I mentioned, Stern Salam Bank may have something like that. I don't know about others, so I don't really want to say. Hedge funds are problematic. Yeah, so hedged equity index is, it's obviously hedge funds, derivatives, these are problematic because they will not take ownership in an actual asset or service. So this is the first litmus test for whether something is halal to invest in, but it's not the only one. Yeah. The thing is, there's a lot of comments, but not a lot of questions. So I'm trying to sift through hundreds of questions, statements here.
There's a few people asking for a few practical steps that we can take to exit the Riba system.
Okay, that's a really good question. And I should have addressed it earlier. So number one, the first practical step is to look at all of your statements. Is there any riba coming in? This is your bank statements. This is your credit cards. So number one, with the bank statements, you are going to ensure that there are zero interest accounts. So checking accounts can satisfy that. You can tell the bank, I do not want to pay or receive interest. And they will do this simply. Thank you. They'll do this simply by giving an interest-free account. And if you can't, then go to another bank. So how is this practically done? You walk in and normally they ask you to give standing order instructions. So this is what I've done in the past, is just written on a piece of paper, signed it, given it to them, and they're satisfied. And I've never been charged interest, never paid interest, alhamdulillah, in my life. So that's number one. Number two, you look at your credit card statements. So credit cards are in and of themselves impermissible unless you satisfy one condition, because they contain interest in the contract. But if you satisfy this condition, and the condition is darura, for extreme need, and this is not my opinion, this is the opinion of Mufti Ibrahim Isa, and who was working with Mufti Taqi Usmani, and also the opinion of others. So the opinion is that if you satisfy this extreme need, what is the extreme need in this case? You can't do basic things like renting a car, renting a hotel room. These things can't be done in many cases. For instance, in Massachusetts, I was in Western Mass. I'd just given a talk and I was at the hotel and I tried to pay with a debit card. They wouldn't accept, even though the debit card was a Visa card, they would not accept. Then I said, what about cash? And I'll put the cash down as a huge deposit. They wouldn't accept even $500. Then they said, then I gave them the credit card. So I tested this out in a couple of different places. So that is, once you satisfy that condition, there's three things you should be doing. Number one, you should prepay your credit card. If you're using your credit card for credit, there's a problem. You need to assess your spending habits. MIT did a study called Always Leave Home Without It. And they found that you're twice as likely to spend money if you use a credit card to spend that money compared to cash or the other things that people use these days. So I personally do not like to actually use a credit card, but if I need to and I must, it is a payment mechanism, not a credit mechanism. So the first thing is you prepay the credit card. They won't refuse. You give the credit card an extra $1,000 or $2,000, whatever you think you're going to spend, and you've effectively turned your credit card into a debit card. Number two, auto pay. You all know about auto pay. And number three, in case there's like, some kind of glitch in the system, you have live human beings. In the inevitable time that you're going to die, and there's a pretty good chance you're going to have a credit card in your pocket when you're dead, and there's a pretty good chance there's going to be a balance on that credit card when you've died. So you need to have live human beings who are going to pay on your behalf. So, I've got my sister and brother-in-law at the ready. If they are not around, then I'll find somebody else. So you need to have these three things: prepay, auto pay, and live human beings who are going to pay in the event of your unexpected demise. So that's the credit card. So we've done the bank accounts and the credit cards. And then there's the mortgages. If you have a car loan, the fuqaha say, sell the car. Okay. If you and buy a cheap used car, when I was at Harvard, there was I had a $3,000 25-year-old Honda Civic, so just stay within your means. There's public transport is everywhere too. You don't like it, but it's a lot better than warring with Allah and his messenger. And then the other thing is obviously the home. So how is the home thing done? You get out of the mortgage, and what money you get, you either purchase something less expensive or you rent. The opinion, I was asked by the muftis to mention this, the opinion that, riba is totally haram, but the first home is halal because there's a dharura. And the dharura is, there's no dharura to own a home. You can rent. The dharura is to have shelter, and you can get a shelter with rent. So these are actual considerations. And look, most people who know about riba and its consequences would rather live in a cardboard box than they would live in a 5-chandelier villa. So we have to sort of ask ourselves, is my $2,000 a year cappuccino habit eating into my savings? So my $10,000 a year burger habit, whatever, restaurant food is poison anyway. It's got the three worst things known to man: refined carbohydrates, vegetable oil, and MSG. So you can do without it. No matter how busy you are. I was pretty busy on this trip, but alhamdulillah, managed to slap the fish fillet on the hot plate, throw in some vegetables, and half an hour later I had dinner. So you are not that busy to put together a 1-minute prep meal. And that is a lot of the times, our three biggest expenditures are rent, tax, and wasted little things, wasteful little things. And you know what they are. Everybody's got a different wasteful little thing. Those little things add up to thousands or tens of thousands of dollars a year. So let's, go back to the old-fashioned paradigm. People say, how old are you? I always say, thousands of years old. So, we have to go back to the old-fashioned ways of buying what we can afford with what we have in our pocket, tangible stuff that either, if it's a depreciating asset like a used car, that's fine. But if it's like an investment, then it's something that gives us not just liquidity, but a little bit of growth, but it gives us safety, which is paramount in these times. So what are these times? These times, we've talked about the $39 trillion of debt, rising oil prices, but, the gold and silver prices, which are really a proxy measure for currency, faith in the currency system. And then also you've got the political upheavals that are happening. So, when the Wall Street traders saw the 9/11 buildings go down, the first thing they said was 2 words: buy gold. So it is, unfortunately, we're living in such times, and the order of the day is wealth preservation. So get out of your conventional mortgage, and it's not helping you, it's hurting you. So I would say those four things, the bank account, the credit card, the car loan, and the home loan. And then we've also got the business loan, education, whatnot. So I had a guy who had $200,000 of tuition money facing him, and he came to me and I said, unfortunately, Riba is so haram, and education, however recommended it is, and for some people obligatory, it doesn't get to the level of the haram of Riba. So I said, look, let's work together on this. And then we did. Alhamdulillah, he was satisfied because he could do it. What did he have to do? Well, $200,000 over 4 years is $50,000. $50,000, you need to make two payments. That's $25,000. You pay, semesterly. $25,000. I mean, that's like grant territory. You can walk into your guy, look, you can just open up and tell them, look, I am a student who is a Muslim, and I'm religiously obliged to avoid taking interest. Can you help me with anything? And if they can't, then you can go to the next thing. I actually asked the Muslim, the masjid guys, I said, how are the students being helped? And he shrugged his shoulder. He said, no one asks. He says, we have tons of money. So this is not, I've been traveling through California and Texas, tons of money. I mean, one fundraiser could set up a student fund. So, we should, as Muslims, be developing institutions. That's the first thing we should develop, is institutions that support our students. There is one organization called a Continuous Charity, ACC. I believe it's in Texas, maybe in California. And they actually help students with that. So there's the student, educational loans. We need to get out of that. And for businesses, I mentioned Stern Salam Bank. You can also, for the home, you can do financings. We've checked out Guidance Residential. If it's the same co-ownership model that's that's approved by Mufti Taqi Usmani, Dr. Imran Usmani, and others, it should be fine. And if people have questions about the Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae relationship, we can go deep into that. And then there's UIF, University Islamic Financial. They also seem solid. So these three organizations are, inshallah, a starting point as well.
What's the third?
Stern Salam Bank, Guidance Residential, and UIF.
Stearns does homes now?
I think so. I'm not sure, because they call themselves the first full-service Islamic bank in the United States.
Full service. Okay, good.
So I would presume that includes home financings.
Good. All right, let's take a look. What else is here?
Sure.
Questions here. If you sell your home and there's no way to avoid interest-free savings account.
What's the question?
Interest-free savings account.
What about it?
He says here, there's no way to avoid interest-free savings account.
Great. That's what we want.
Yeah.
He's saying there's no way to avoid interest-free savings account.
Well, that didn't make sense. Interest in the savings account.
Well, yeah, there is. So, okay. So just getting back, you should sort of know a little bit of a background. I come from a middle-class background. My father was an engineer.
Yeah.
I did not spend enough time in investment banking to become mega wealthy. So I'm speaking from the position of somebody who has bought properties in North America, bought cars, paid for an education. All of it was with cash. So I'm not actually coming from the perspective of a lot of wealth. I'm not some dilettante. So I will definitely give you the perspective of what is possible. What is possible is that if you walk into any bank, they will have an interest-free account. And there's, 5 to 10 million Muslims, depending on who you ask in this country. And a lot of them are asking for the same thing. So there are interest-free accounts, and it is avoidable. I have never met anybody in my life who was forced to take riba.
Mm-hmm.
There is always another option, especially now.
Yeah. Sol Flash. Stop this. We could barely pay our rent, and you're telling us to buy gold. I guess the Sol, it counts for salty. Why are you so upset? He's advising people who have the money. If you don't have the money, that's specific to you.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
or to anybody else. He's giving advice to those to whom it applies. So
yes.
Why are you so upset?
If you don't have the money, there's a blessing in that. I know that things aren't, I've been in a situation where I have not had money, and life was simple, and, things were okay. The problem is not poverty, but relative poverty. When you look around and, they've got their fifth chandelier, or as Sheikh Mu sometimes says, their second crate of foot deodorant. This is what makes people feel impoverished. But really, the easiest way to wealth is contentment. So there is actually the gold recommendations or rather what I do with gold is just because I have projects, I need to have money ready for those projects, and those projects are going to cost a lot of money. This trip wasn't free. This $50,000 on 3 months on a trip is going to need some wealth. So that kind of thing is going towards something useful. However, if you don't have it, then it's another kind of blessing. So
poverty is also like you said, there are things that can make things really far worse, and that's why people do get salty. If you stare at the Prophet ﷺ said, happiness, it is relative. If you're constantly staring at people who are better than you in any capacity, then when you look at them and you look away, you're still thinking about it. It stays on your mind, and it builds this narrative and this consciousness. So what does the Quran say? Don't look. Don't look at what we've given other people. And the Prophet ﷺ said, do look at those who have less than you. Because that's what forms your psychology, is what you look at and what therefore stays in your memory. And therefore you start building your reality based upon that. So like you said, if your life is a 7 out of 10, but you're always hanging out with 9s, you're not going to be happy. If your life is a 5 and you intentionally look and spend your time with 3s, you're going to feel great. And that's why the Prophet said, if anybody who complains, the best thing to tell them is it could have been 10 times worse. I knew a guy, subhanAllah, this guy, nothing went well for him in life. At every turn, only a few things were good for him. But the major things were not that great for him. But he always would have a smile on his face, say, look, could have been worse, right? It could have been 10 times worse. And that was his mantra. That was his phrase, if we could put it like that. So happiness is relative. It's relative to who you douse yourself in. If you douse yourself amongst company of people who have tons of wealth, you're always going to be miserable, of course. That's why I love coming here. The soup kitchen is in the middle of a not wealthy area at all. In fact, the homes are miserable. No one's got a manicured grass. No one has a nice fence. No one has nice siding. We're the nicest house on the block, right? By far, by a mile. And we didn't do anything. We just stuck on the outside. We put a new roof up, right? So that's the idea, is that it's relative. So there is a way in which to be happy. By the way, the very wealthy, if they hang out with the uber wealthy, they're going to be miserable too. And there is a lot of people who are like that. They're social climbers. They're always looking up. They're never happy with whatever you give them. They're never happy. Okay. Let's see. What do you think here? You telling us to be like rich, but not look at them. Yeah. Make money and don't look at rich. Yeah. You do one thing, and your ambition, our ambition, the ambition, what the Prophet gives us is the ambition of the akhirah, the ambition of the grave. Like ambition, like where am I headed in life? We're headed to the grave, right? But in the meantime, I got to be here, so I got to make some money, right? And my favorite, the best justification is, I don't necessarily need the money, but the electric company wants my money, okay? The supermarket wants my money, the soccer team wants my money, the kids' soccer team, the kids' school wants my money. A lot of people need my money, right? And then and the community needs money, so we got to earn. We got to earn, but your mind, your heart has to be on the life of Zuhud. You could break your mind up into quadrants. There's one quadrant you have to make money. There's another quadrant for your family. There's another quadrant for your deen, and then there's another quadrant for zuhud. Deen, I mean your work, your ilm. That's very social, right? But then you have to have a quadrant for zuhud. And that is when you go into that mental space, you just visualize yourself living alone on a beach at the end of life. I have no concerns, no ties, not with people. It's just myself, the Quran, and I'm ready to meet my Lord. And that you literally deflate all the potential hasad that enters the mind of a person and the heart of a person when you're interacting. All the sort of rat race competition, it's all mental. So you got to exit it mentally too. You could physically be there, but your mind is still competing with people. That's why a lot of people go on vacations and they're still tired, because they physically went on a vacation, but they didn't mentally go on a vacation. And I'm telling you, you could actually mentally go on a vacation and physically be in the world, right? Interacting with hundreds of people every day. But mentally, every day you have a period of time, like when you put your head on the pillow and you're gone. Completely disappear. You deflate all that stress. And that's what I call, like, that's worldly spirituality. You want to deflate stress faster? Read some Quran and then read Dala'il al-Khairat for an hour. That's the angelic light. Because there's angelic unseen, and then there's earthly unseen, and then there's satanic unseen. So we want the angelic and the earthly. Kalimux is saying, how many teenagers there are in the chat? You know, summer chat's always like this. You should see what the TikTok looks like. All right, couple more questions before you wrap up. Is redirecting interest a valid or better approach? Bank use our money to earn interest. Why not take the interest and donate it for something beneficial? So let me tell you something. The interest is considered, it's like an invalid wealth. So you cannot donate invalid wealth, but you can give it away, not expecting reward. That's the key. You're going to take it from them, so you give it away. But how do you give it away? Not to anything pure. You give it away to things that are used for dirtiness. Like, for example, a mop for the masjid. You don't benefit from it. That's number one. You cannot benefit from it. Toilet paper for the masjid. Things that are for low usages. Like spray, cleaning spray, mops, all that stuff. You can buy that for the masjid. And don't expect reward for it.
And for people who, is this on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. If for people who have riba from the past, they should give it away. They have to estimate, or if they have the statements, calculate exactly and give that away to the poor. This is, as Dr. Shadee mentioned, it is not for reward. You're just basically getting the money out. And in terms of who can you give it to, you can give it to a Muslim who is otherwise zakat eligible, but this is not zakat. This is not, this is just cleaning, purifying your wealth. Mm-hmm. So you're not getting a reward. It's not like sadaqah or zakat. So that's one thing. The other thing is just a quick commercial break for the teenagers. Mm-hmm. Teenagers, the first thing you can do, and you can do this at any age, if Alexander the Great could rule empires as a teenager, there's no reason why we need to be doom scrolling. So we can do more than what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Number one, I was 15 when I set up my first company. Okay. Not very scalable. It was like a word processing company, but made some money on the side. And I continue that through university. You can, especially nowadays, and, the Gen Z so-called, they are smart enough, savvy enough, certainly more than us old timers, with the internet, with off-the-shelf and open-sourced apps, that they can earn halal wealth through many means. So there's no reason stopping you from starting your own company. It is exciting, it is fun, it is mubarak, and is highly recommended. I left Morgan Stanley, and after that, I did a few other gigs, but basically by the time I was 31, launched Ethica, and have not stopped. 32, I have not stopped since then, 2002. So this is really, really practical advice for somebody who is a teenager now. The other thing is, a side note, I mentioned about the restaurants, poisonous, but the other thing is, and also wastes a lot of money. But the other thing is, read books on paper.
Mhm.
Okay. If you read books on paper, it has many, 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 many positive effects. And we don't have to just, an hour a day, read and write on paper. That aesthetic, that tactile experience, that the comprehension you gain thereby, the lucidity, your ability to communicate, to be articulate, all of these things help you in so many other ways. There's so much transfer taking place when you simply read. They say readers are leaders. We're not interested in being leaders, but we are interested in the benefit that comes from it. And then obviously live relationships. I learned about a new thing that younger people call it as touch grass.
Mhm.
So you need to have that live experience. They did a study on class valedictorians, and they couldn't find any commonality except one thing. And what was it? They always made a point of eating dinner with their families. So your relationships with Allah, your family, your friends, this is actually real life. If you reduce your life to a small screen, that's all you're going to be worth, a postage stamp. So you can do better than that.
Here's a question. Aren't all the accounts in a bank used for debt creation? I think the answer is yes, 100%.
Yes. This is why I keep mentioning Stern Salam Bank, because I believe they provide a retail option. And by the way, I should have charged them advertising, but I get no money and no sponsorship or anything. Ethica is our own company.
Yep.
And alhamdulillah, we have, if you want, you can email me the questions. We've got a team of 21 Mufti level, AOFI level scholars. So we've got the firepower to handle these questions that come in, and inshallah, we'll get them answered.
Okay, Boneless Chicken says, how do you give $20,000 of riba buying mops? Well, very easily, because there are institutions out there like Islamic schools, and they clean up every day after school. There's 180 school days, and they bring in a team of 5 people every single day to clean the school, top to bottom. So how much do you think that costs? What do you think that contract is with the cleaning company?
And even if it's not, toiletries, you can give it to anyone deserving of zakat without the intention of it being zakat.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm just overheating under these lamps.
No problem. A couple more questions here. How do you access gold and silver quickly or in an emergency if it's held by a third party? Well, he answered that. He said, you can't.
Can't really.
You can't. It's held by a third party, so you're trading safety for speed.
Yeah,
safety that it's not in your house.
It can be one day at some places, but in my experience, it went from like 3 days to 45 days arbitrarily, unilaterally, overnight.
Yeah. But you do have the peace of mind that I don't have to preserve it myself, essentially.
Yeah.
And then get robbed. Okay.
But even if you get robbed, if you have a security system that's connected to you and the authorities, then they don't stand a chance, because the idea is to put it in such a way that takes them at least 5 to 10 minutes to access.
Oh, I see.
First they have to find it, and then they have to whatever.
Yeah. We're not going to talk about where this place to keep it is, because
I think if people who have homes, homes have a structures, they've got floors and walls and roofs. We're not talking about stuff that you need every day. We're talking about, you're parking it like your 401k. If you can say goodbye to your 401k till you're 59 and a half, then certainly you can store it in a safe place. Having said that, there is always the third party option. Allocated storage.
How much gold as a percentage of wealth is considered preservation versus hoarding?
I don't know the answer to that. Sheikh Nu actually wrote in Sea Without Shore about wealth and possessions in that chapter. Talks about how much to have. A good barometer is when you pray. Prayer is always a good barometer. If you're thinking about your wealth because you have too little or because you have too much, then it's time to make adjustments. So that's the litmus test is a wealth occupying, or lack of it thereof, occupying a lot of your thoughts and time and himma and energy. So this is the main sort of test, and we all know whether we have too much or too little of something.
Yeah.
So
it's also, I think, mental, right? It's a mental thing. It's your intent too. I mean, a person could save $100,000 and that's not enough. What if he has 10 kids, right? Another person save $100,000 and he has one kid.
absolutely.
So you can see that there's a lot of relativity. That's why he said percentage. What's the percentage?
And I would add, like in that same book that I just mentioned, See Without Shore, there's a Sheikh Yunus, that chapter on Sheikh Yunus, he talks about sohbah, meaning companionship, who you sit with. If you sit with the people of dunya, then the dunya becomes this giant thing and the next life becomes a little speck.
100%.
And if you sit with the people of the akhirah, then this world becomes a little speck and the next world becomes everything. So this is what we want to do, is we want to cultivate relationships with people who are better than us. And if we can't do that all the time, then we should do it at least sometime. And we can always open a book. You know, Imam Ghazali is a wonderful person to spend time with.
When you pray in the masjid, those people who pray 5 daily prayers, they are the zuhad of the community. They're the ascetics of the community. You should hang out with them. At least show up and be with them multiple times a day.
Absolutely.
They're the zuhad. Here's a question from Suhail 1101. He's been a member for 7 months and he likes Khabib. The Prophet ﷺ said the best fasting after Ramadan is Muharram, yet the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah are the best days of the year. How do we reconcile? First 10 days of Dhul Hijjah are the best days for the ijabah of dua, for forgiveness of sins in that respect. And the fast of Yom Arafah is this greatest fast of the year outside of Ramadan. And then the fasting of Muharram is nafl. It could be the greatest nafl. If that, I don't even see the grade of that hadith, but as nafl. So the fasting is one thing, but the greatest day is a separate thing. But anyway, we could start looking at that. Someone could look that up, that hadith in the first place. Secondly, the fasting Yom Ashura is a light sunnah to fast, and that is on Thursday, inshallah. So you can fast Wednesday, Thursday, or Thursday, Friday. Okay. Is it haram to not boycott Israeli products? That means, let's flip it now. Is it halal to buy Israeli products? Many of the ulama have highly discouraged anything that helps that economy or that nation, if not forbidden it. Right?
Yeah, this is one of those questions where the answer doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
You know, why buy Israeli products, period? Because they are violating every international law.
Yeah.
And we are a world of international law.
Mm-hmm.
They're violating Geneva Convention. They're violating, in fact, many of their own laws. And it's, it's just, it is not being held in check because they have so much sway over the U.S. government. And alhamdulillah, we have people like Tucker Carlson, Nicholas Fuentes, Candace Owens. These people are now starting to spread more awareness about the problem. However, we, for our part, shouldn't even be thinking about these Israeli products.
Yep.
Having said that, there's a lot of Israeli products, or at least let's just say products that are American, but they are very actively connected to the Israeli government. So the example would be Palantir.
Mm-hmm.
That is basically a data company that is working with a lot of governmental agencies, but is very much involved with Israeli intelligence. There is, obviously WhatsApp, Google, and all these things are pretty much straight out of, Sergey Brin and Larry Page are active Zionists.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Thiel, he's a Christian Zionist. He runs one of the AI companies, Sam Altman, another Zionist. You know, he runs OpenAI. So the whole financial and AI industry, and you know, this is very, you know, they have their fingers deep into that.
Yep.
So I don't know where the boycott would begin or where it would end, but if it's Israeli, then you know it's a pretty easy
These
decision.
you know, JD Vance, when he gave his speech on Israel, his poll numbers for presidency skyrocketed. He became like the favorite. So it's pretty much across the board. Speak out against Israel, your poll numbers go up.
And JD Vance is he's going to probably be running in 28. And when he was at Yale, you know, after Yale, he received the highest private donation from Peter Thiel.
Yep.
to the tune of $20 million.
Yep.
For his Senate run.
Mm-hmm.
So Peter Thiel and JD Vance are like basically the same thing.
That's his backer. Big tech is his backer.
Yeah.
His
So
original backer.
So it's at this point, it is so all encompassing that what can we do as Muslims living in America?
Yep.
We can just have a little bit of financial sovereignty, you know, ownership and privacy.
Yep. All right, let's see other things here. Is allocated verified bullion in third-party storage the best approach?
For me, it's the second best approach. I believe the best approach is keeping it home if you have safety.
Yep.
If you don't have, if there's like personal safety issues, or your home, you know, it's a rental and you can't do stuff with it, then yeah, it's better than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, like I mentioned, we need to get out of the mindset of like owning things on paper, not even on paper, digitally, with third parties we can't really trust. And that's what we become comfortable with.
Yeah, we just too trusting.
I mean, let's give an example of like cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency. First of all, Mufti Taqi Usmani, we had the fatwa. In fact, what you read was not the more recent fatwa. The most recent fatwa from Mufti Taqi Usmani clearly states that it's haram. But let's just go back to like, why is cryptocurrency haram? So number one, there's in the illa, the legal reason for something to be a valid medium of exchange is, number one, that it is backed by something like gold or silver, which the dollar isn't. Then it goes to the second condition, which is that it is widely accepted. There's urf, there's customary practice for its usage, and it's widely accepted. Mm-hmm. So we looked up what's the acceptance of Bitcoin. And we looked up the acceptance of cryptocurrency, and it was 39%. We were thinking to ourselves, well, I was with the Mufti on the call, and it seemed a bit high. So I did a little digging, and it turns out the number comes from the National Cryptocurrency Association. So, wow, that sounds pretty official. Then I looked up what the National Cryptocurrency Association is.
Just a website.
They received a grant of $50 million.
Whoa.
A grant.
Wow. Not
an investment, a grant. They just handed them a $50 million paycheck from Ripple Labs. Ripple Labs is a financial technology company that specializes in, you guessed it, cryptocurrency. So they had a for-profit fund give money away to a nonprofit lobbying organization to make these numbers. And by the way, Ripple Labs was under and may still be under SEC investigation. So you have this situation where it's like, well, you know, they're the ones who are promoting it for their own, you know, benefit.
Sounds like it's one of the players hiring the referees.
Yeah.
Right? One of the teams pays the referees. So
yeah, the when it goes over 50%, the Mufti said, you know, right now Walmart, Costco, all these guys don't accept it, and this is like this is the acceptance rate in the number of retailers. Mm-hmm. So let's just get out of crypto and keep it real, as they say.
You know, Kinetic Nomad's asking a good question. The problem with university is the real issue. College education, there are no, except for ACC. That's the only one. ACC is the only one where
start one.
Yeah, Yeah.
I mean, the Muslims are flush in cash. There is literally, I had a conversation one-on-one with, I won't say his worth exactly, but let's just say in the tens of billions of dollars. Okay. And he's doing a lot of good work. He's not just keeping it for himself, doing a lot of good work, alhamdulillah. But when I went to other places like LA and Dallas and Houston, there's Muslims that are like $50, $100 million, not on anyone's radar, totally stealth, totally quiet, but they have the money. Let's get up on the mic and say, we need a student financing. I spoke to a guy yesterday in DC. He is ready to launch a student financing. We're not going to call it student loans because loan is, like there's no Islamic pork, so there's no Islamic loans unless it's interest-free. But we can have a student financing in which you structure it in such a way, and Ethica does this kind of stuff. We structure products that helps the investor, helps and provides some kind of solution for the entire country. I mean, forget home finance. If you solve the student finance problem in this country, that's just a multi-billion-dollar market just waiting there.
Yep.
But even if you do an interest-free thing, you can just do that. Go to your masjid, say, look, I want to do a fundraiser, a family night for, most masajid have a family night once a month or once a week. Go there, do a fundraiser, and create an interest-free fund for students, and people's hearts will go out. You put the students out, real stories, and you can just tell them, look, it's haram for me to take a ribawi loan, no matter how badly I want to go to this university. And having said that, if you're at a state school, before Harvard, I went to UMass Amherst. My dad paid for UMass Amherst. He saved money for 18 years before he could pay for my education. I saved money for 4 years before I could pay for 2 years of grad school. So the saving thing has to sort of be there too. And this is where gold and silver comes in handy. But we should have funds. We should have institutions. We've gone to the halal meat level. Now we need to go to the institutional wealth level. So that's the next big thing waiting.
You better major in something useful then. If someone's giving you a Qaruz Hasan, halal, no interest loan, it better not be something like, gender studies and photography, whatever nonsense. It's not going to earn you anything. All right, last question has nothing to do with this. What is the saying on Jism La Kal Ajsam? In Aqidah question. What is a statement on the phrase about a jism, but not like other jisms? So what's the hukum shariah on that? So the hukum is that the utterance cannot be, that expression, it cannot be judged unless the terms are defined. So if the term of jism is that it's something that upholds itself, meaning self-sufficient, then that's not the issue. If it means that it's something composed of matter, as the common definition of a jism. So anything that takes up space, essentially, anything, even angels are jism latif. Right? So something that has dimensions, has parts, has measurability, even if it's very subtle, like the human ruh or the malaika. I mean, we have Wi-Fi's and all sorts of signals flying around the room that we can't see. It'd be extremely difficult for us to measure. That doesn't mean they're not measurable. Doesn't mean they're not taking up space. So if you use that, then yes, that's a kufri statement. So the only reason though, and that's what the Hanbali books say, Al-Ayn wal-Athar says that, also Qala'id al-Aqiyan says that, and all the Ash'ari Maturidi books say that too. But if someone were to say Jism La Kal Ajsam, but they intend by that the first meaning of jism, so something that is self-sufficient unto itself, right? So he's saying, I mean that kind of jism, not the jism of the body. So in that case, it would be sinful to say that because of the confusion, and that's why some of the madhabs say that that's fisq to say that, because it could cause confusion, right? And it's unclear what you're saying, and somebody could then hear that and think that you believe it's a body of matter unlike other bodies of matter, So that would be that, which is the kufri statement. So you could look that up in Qala'id al-Aqyan. Man qala anna Allah jismun faqad kafar, wa man qala Jism La Kal Ajsam, also kafir, or kufri statement. And when we talk about takfir, it's very good to divide it into three parts, which is the utterance, the meaning behind the utterance, and then the person who says it. Now, what's the difference? The utterance, oftentimes we can't even make a ruling on the utterance unless we ask about the meaning. Just because you understand a term a certain way and have heard it a certain does not mean that it's the only meaning that this word has. And it happens all the time in knowledge that a certain civilization or a certain century, they use a word to mean something. Another nation at another century uses the same word, but they have a different meaning for it. So they can't believe he said this. Yeah, he doesn't mean what you think he means. The same utterance, but different meanings. So the meaning you have to ask about, and then you parse it out. As for the person, right, you would need to get that person if you have authority, like a judge, a king, a sultan. You need to sit them down and then discuss with them what they meant in order to know, and then show them the gravity of it, and then give them istitaba, which is advise them to make tawbah, recant from this, if they meant something that was problematic in the first place. None of us can do that, right? So that's why there's a difference between the utterance, the meaning, and the individual. So that's a thing for those who are into Masail of Aqidah. Last couple questions here. The Ottomans. Of course, the Ottomans, that's, who is that? MUW Arabic, is Muqarabic, whatever. 100%. The Ottomans, their destruction came, firstly, they were waning for a long time. They just weren't producing much. Their population slowly was declining. They weren't producing a lot. They were losing wars. There was no research and development. As all civilization, like an old man. This is like an old man. But what sped up their destruction is Sultan Abdul Majid. He started taking interest, and he needed to fight against the Russians. So he went to the French and the English, and he said, I need a loan, right? And he took a loan. And the French and English covered the loan by selling it as bonds to the people. And then at some point, they went, he couldn't pay back anymore. So he announced that you're only going to get a percentage back. You're just not getting your money back. So the people went nuts because the British loaned it based on the people. They sold it as bonds. So the people went nuts. Now the British need to placate the people. So they sent a bunch of suits, bankers, over to the Ottoman Empire. And they say, what's going on here? Why aren't you paying? They said, there's no money. They said, well, what did you use the loan for? I said, oh, building this beautiful palace for myself. He's like a fool. So they actually set up shop right across from where the palace lives. And he said, from now on, we're the tax collectors. That's the humiliation. We're going to collect taxes for you. So they went around to the farmers, and the taxation money didn't go to the Ottoman Sultan anymore. It went to the British and the French. He got upset about all that. And then he went to the Germans. The Germans, they didn't like the fact that the Ottoman Empire was close to the French and English and beholden to them. They said, that's a problem for us. So the Germans came in and said, we'll actually give you a better offer, right? And you'll just pay us instead. So they took that deal. So they basically just traded handcuffs, right? Your handcuffs are more, you ever see SoFi? I don't know how this company works, but SoFi basically takes your debt, shows you the person who bought SoFi or whatever, and says, oh, all of a sudden my debt's gone, right? And my debt's much less. It's like, are we dumb here? No one's giving you charity to pay your debts. That's a different deal, right? And probably your debt payment went down from $3,000 a month to $2,000 a month, but the term probably increased. Obviously, SoFi's got to make money somehow. So the Ottoman Empire went from being beholden to the French and the British to the Germans. And that's why in the World Wars, you found the Ottoman Empire siding with the Germans in World War I. And so when the Axis powers lost and the Allies won, that's what they were called, right? When the Allies won, then the whole Ottoman Empire was in the hands of the French and the British because they were insolvent, couldn't pay anything, and therefore we're going to seize your assets, which is your land when you're the government.
And you mentioned World War One. Bankers have a two-way relationship with the war machine.
Mm-hmm.
Wars are expensive; they need bankers.
Mm-hmm.
Wars are profitable. Bankers need wars.
Yep.
So you can actually make the relationship between banks and wars very easily.
Mm-hmm.
You use World War One as an example. The Schiff brothers, the Jewish bankers, funded both sides of World War One.
Which brothers?
Schiff, Schiff. They funded both sides of World War One. Gaza, Citibank funded billions of dollars to Israel to drop bombs on innocent women, children, and men. So this is like, we are in a situation where banks now, Sheikh gives the example of like, he said that politicians are bank employees. So we are doing their bidding.
100%.
So, the number one boycott you can do is take your money out of the bank. Okay. Mechanically, how does it work? It works like this. You get your salary. It comes into your interest-free bank. If you haven't been able to find an Islamic one, I gave the example of Stern Salam Bank. You take the money out, okay? You keep whatever the minimum is, and you take the money out. And you keep, what I do is I just keep 1 or 2 months of cash for my family and my business. And then I put the rest, I just go down to the market and buy gold or silver physically. And, my kids always know when I've been to the gold guy because I'm low on cash. However, it's easy to convert. And what I recommend is that instead of keep constantly paying premiums to the gold guys or silver guys, you can just have a little, group, Telegram or WhatsApp or whatever you use, have a group in which you buy and sell to each other. A lot of people do this. Mm-hmm. And that you don't charge anyone premiums. You just do it at spot price. The spot price is right there on your screen, and you can buy and sell all the time. And you'll do much better than if, you keep it with third parties.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jazakumullah khairan to Atif Khan. And bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we will be back. Let's see the schedule. Bismillah. Let's take a look at the live stream schedule this week. So we are on what's today? June 23rd. 24th, I'm here. 25th is Imam Safwan Eid. All right. So this Wednesday, it's myself. Thursday is Safwan Eid. This Thursday, I'll be heading off to Milwaukee. Masjid al-Quran, and we'll have Jum'ah there, talk about Sayyidina al-Imam al-Hussein and Ashura, and then Friday night talk with them as well. So if you're in Milwaukee, you can feel free to come out to Masjid al-Quran. Jazakumullah khairan, everybody. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wal asr inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat wa tawasaw bil haqq وتواصوا بالصبر والسلام عليكم.
Kalbe şiir